Amidst the heat of the Floridian summer, it pays to get out early, as we did this Sunday morning. Setting up pre-dawn at Lake Panasoffkee, the weather is already warm and humid, but this morning, my friend Dakota and I have made the drive up the S-Line for a morning southbound with some very interesting power. Located at milepost S769.7 is Lake Panasoffkee, an ABS signal located between Bushnell and Coleman. On the S-Line, there's a signal about every 2 miles, with ABS signals filling in the gaps between sidings and intermediates. What makes these ABS signals different is that they only turn on when a train enters the block, unlike signals at control points. So with a high green now lit for our southbound, we knew he'd be close, so we drift down to Bushnell to get our first glimpse of this morning's M441.
Dade City, M441, 29, CSX 45, 37, clear, no apparent person, Dade City, south of that.
Two of CSX's rebuilt SD70 Maces would lead this train south this morning, elephant style with a short train in tow. Destined for Tampa, we begin our chase here at Bushnell, pacing the speedy train at sunrise through St. Catherine and down the S-Line.
CSX M441, 29, clear, St. Cat, south of that.
At Rodell, the tracks curve away from US 301 and into the woods, continuing south via Rich Manor and Lakuchi. So we'd put about 5 minutes between us and the train as we pulled into Dade City at dawn, with a high green shining in the distance. We knew the train would have to slow down around Vitus, so we'd beat it there, stopping off for a quick shot at Richland. And into Zephyr Hills with 441 right on our tails. The concrete ties in the foreground were part of the S-Line upgrades from a few years ago, which enabled 50-mile-per-hour track speed for freights. The crew on 441 this morning obviously knew about this, as they'd be using every bit of track speed through town. With 441 being the only train at the time in the area, we'd catch him one last time, now with good light at Plant City. At 7:15 a.m. this Sunday morning, the town is still asleep, with the exception of a couple coffee shops and the railroad, as M441 pounds the diamonds, now only 16 miles away from the terminus at Tampa. M441 is daily mixed freight from Waycross, Georgia to Tampa, Florida, and it's Yeoman Yard, which is the southernmost portion of the old S-Line. Traveling south out of Georgia, the train runs the entirety of the S-Line via Callahan, Baldwin, Ocala, Wildwood, Plant City, and into Tampa. Radio chatter in Lakeland would give us reason to drift back north to Vitus, as two northbounds were coming out of Lakeland heading up the Vitus subdivision, which combines with the Wildwood sub right here at Vitus Junction. Although the two northbounds were stacked back to back out of Lakeland, a southbound would be the first to receive signals, as seen here at the south end of Dade City siding. The dispatcher was going to hold one of the northbound trains in the Vitus double track to meet this train, calling as L743, headed south towards Winston with rock loads from Brown Sand, Georgia, and auto racks from Baldwin.
Need a CSX 741, got a clear south end Dade City on the main. We heading south.
Let's see, now you guys got any roads blocked where you are, or you want to stay there for two? Okay, all right, I'll let you go after one. Okay, yeah.
The JA dispatcher in Jacksonville would be holding northbound B207 in the Vitus double track, and he'd be stopped waiting at the Richland crossovers when we'd arrive.
NXT L74328, lead into CSX 741, got a limited clear Vitus Junction. Track 1, single main southbound.
With the last of L743's auto racks past the crossovers, the switches would reverse to diverge the northbound from track 2 to 1. Usually, B207 would be waiting at the north end of the double track at Ellerslie, but a bad order car would be stored on track 2 for the time, making the operational double track section end here at Richland. B207 would be on the move north, but another meet was set for the next siding ahead, Dade City. At South End Dade City, a medium approach medium would be lit for B207, taking him into the siding at medium speed, in an attempt to keep the train from stopping at the north end. B207's string of jumbo-covered hoppers would roll into the siding, filled to the brim with Floridian phosphate mined in the Bowen Valley for the BNSF in Cicero, Illinois.
CSX JA dispatcher Jacksonville, answer no.
B207, over.
B20728, go ahead.
Yes, Bert, the crossing at the south end of Dade City, the AR 830, roughly .9, it's right there at the very south end of Dade City. The crossing arm was bent kind of close to the tracks. We hit it, but it didn't break it. It's kind of bent a little bit. I believe that coal train, when they come by, it might get hung up on the front of their train.
All right, appreciate it, over.
All right, thank you, Bert. Here we go.
A minute after B207's DPU enters the siding, the south end switch is realigned for the main, as crawling around the corner and coming south would be loaded coal train CO40. Since he was meeting B207 here, he'd have to maintain a safe speed prepared to stop until the south end signals were visible, now showing a high green for him. That bent crossing gate would force an EC1 for CO40, now mandated to travel past the scene at a very slow speed to make sure everything was alright and passable. The crew would notch it back up as soon as the lead motors would pass.
Need another one there at Vitus. JF out.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 2.
A call out from the Melrose defect detector at Vitus would spit out another train on track 2 that was also waiting for CO40 again at Richland. A high green at Vitus would indicate that the northbound train, M452, was clear of the switch at Lumberton just around the corner where the double track singles up.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 1.
Clear, milepost AR 836.6, southbound, number 1 main.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 1. No defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axles 4, 5, 8. Detector out.
C0427 on the lead engine 3364. Clear, milepost AR 837.8. Southbound, number 1 main and single main. No defects. Alright, go to mark up 452, safe one up. Alright, we just got back over here. Y'all look good too. Y'all be safe. Yeah, thank you.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 2.
M452 would get a slow start out of Richland, so we'd take the opportunity to skip up a couple miles to Mudfish Road in Dade City. That crossing at South End Dade City would cause a slow order until a maintenance crew would come out and fix it. Of note on today's train would be the third locomotive, an AC-44CW, recently repainted into CSX's YN3C paint scheme. I find it nice to see that this paint scheme is slowly getting added to the older locomotives, like these 1990s era AC-44s.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 2. No defects. Repeat, no defects. Detector out.
No defects. No defects. 452 says 1872.36 has got a clear South End Dade City and 452 72.36 northbound out.
With freight from Miami, today's M452 would be making stops in Winston, Wildwood, and finally Baldwin, where he'd overnight prior to the final leg of the journey to Waycross. Nowadays, Winston Yard in Lakeland has been receiving more rock than it ever has before. On trains like this M452, it's evident, as the rock that it has left from Miami is only half of what it had at first, before its drop off in Winston. Another train that brings rock is L743.
L74305, clear, Richland, track 1 south, CSX 446 up.
With cars from Brownstown, Georgia, this train is sometimes a unit train of aggregate, like in this instance, save for the bad order tank car that was picked up on the way south. Moving south and towards home, our last stop would be along the Yeoman sub at nights, as a high green signal would make us pull off and shoot whatever was coming north. It would be our third unit train of the day, this one symboled G576, a northbound empty grain train out of Tampa for the BNSF interchange in Birmingham, Alabama. The BNSF power on these trains add to the excitement of these grain moves that only run to Tampa a few times a month now.
G576, 8190 clear.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector. Milepost 818.9er. No defects. No defects. Total axle 466. End of transmission.
Tampa has long been the city in Florida with the most unit trains, spanning from coal, ethanol, grain, and now potash. Beginning earlier this year, CSX began regularly running potash trains off the Canadian Pacific and Canada to Rockport Yard on Tampa Bay for overseas service to a customer in the Caribbean. A Monday drive out to the S-Line would yield one of these trains, bound for Tampa, running south in good daylight. At North End Bushnell, a yellow approach signal would be lit for the potash train, calling as B243, that was to meet northbound M452, who was now entering the siding.
Go ahead, Bristol. Get a couple by you. Over. That's correct, over. CSX dispatcher out.
In a few minutes, 165 loads of potash would come south, hauled by 4 locomotives and not 2 alike. Since this video was shot in late June, about 6 of these trains have run, averaging a good 3 southbound shipments a month. On this day, however, the power would be a lot more interesting than the usual pair of CPGEs. The dispatcher would hold M452 in the siding for one more train, so we'd move north to the distant signal to Bushnell, where a high green would soon indicate the rapid approach of another unit train for Tampa, this one being ethanol, running as the normal B631.
114, locomotive UP6949, got it clear, Lake Manasaki, south out.
More foreign power would haul this train, with 2 Union Pacifics pulling 100 loads of Tampa ethanol. Led by a rebuilt AC6000 number 6949, a Tier 4 SD70 would trail, making for another uncommon consist. The trend around the nation is GE power, which is the norm even when foreign power comes south. So to see an EMD and UP paint on the S-Line would make our time in the blazing heat of Central Florida more than worth it this day.
771.3. No defects. Repeat. No defects. Total axles 408. Detector out.
Driving south along the S-Line on US 301, we'd pull off next at Ridge Manor on the State Road 50 crossing just south of St. Catherine. Similar to the overpass construction in Stark, Ridge Manor's crossing is getting a brand new bridge over the S-Line. Apparently, the traffic on 50 is enough to warrant an overpass, backing up to 301 when a train goes by. I'll make sure to keep an eye on the bridge, as it's possible that a sidewalk will be installed as well, a fine accommodation for overhead shooting. Pushing south, our next stop would be Lakuchi, the next siding after the St. Catherine double track. Stored in the siding for the past few months has been this cut of intermodal wells. All of these blue paint marks on the ties indicate that they need to be switched out with new ones. Rumor has it that CSX never had the time for track maintenance here and now has stored these cars here to make sure nothing uses the siding track. Hopefully soon the track is rehabilitated and cars moved. In April, I-044 would be rolling north through Lakuchi next to the intermodal wells in the siding that had been dropped only a couple weeks before. Breaking out of the siding at the north end is the spur to Cal, Maine. Sadly, the tracks haven't been used in years, as CSX stopped serving the plant sometime in 2019. Prior to that date, the elevator would receive a unit grain train for their large elevator and 3-track yard every once in a while. Presently, in summer 2023, Cal, Maine claims to employ 3 people at the plant, although all access roads are blocked with construction fences and cones. The industry looks somewhat maintained, however the tracks are heavily overgrown and unloading shed looks to be in neglected state. Another curiosity is located just to the west of the industry on what I believe is company-owned land. What looks to be foundations for small homes have been left in solitude, fenced in with no access. I'm not sure if these were once built by Cal, Maine, but whatever it was, the construction process stopped halfway. On the tracks in Lakuchi that are still in service, a high green would be lit for a northbound coming up from the south on the Vitus sub. We'd move to the south end of the short siding where there'd be better light and some shade to wait out for the train in the 100-degree temps. In a few minutes, our northbound would round the corner at Owensboro. It would be our good old friend M452 with more freight out of Miami bound for Waycross. Last stop on the old seaboard would be Vitus, which is actually not seaboard country at all, but a totally ACL junction. At Zephyr Hills, the S-line out of Tampa turns into the ACL Thanota-Sassa to Vitus, Maine, which joins the Vitus sub up from Lakeland right here. No matter who used to own this portion of the line, however, it became part of the extensive seaboard coastline and now the S-line that we all know. Rolling north this evening would be I-044 coming out of Tampa with nightly intermodal traffic. And that wraps it up. A whole summer on the old seaboard from April to August. I hope all of y'all enjoyed this one, even with its length and trainload of information. But until we meet again trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.